So you can find the links to the previous 2 sessions, which was the CV bootcamp as well as the interview preparation, on our YouTube page, Project Girls for Girls South Africa. This session, Navigating the Workplace, is basically just to help you get settled into the workplace and still be yourself. So it's going to be a Q&A session, and sorry, my screen is doing something weird. I'm just going to stop screen sharing. It's a Q&A session, so you will be able to just ask a question. We'll start it off with a few questions, and then you can take over as the attendees. Alice, take it away.
Greetings, everyone. So I will be introducing the speakers or the panelists or industry experts that we will have today. And with us today, we have Patience Mutlana, who has been with us throughout the journey, from the beginning to the end. So Patience has a broad range of expertise in learning and development, assessments, strategy development, marketing, and communications. She has held senior corporate roles in marketing, learning, and development in organizations such as SAP, Standard Chartered Bank, and Standard Bank before joining Joint Prosperity, following a decision to shift gear into assessments and executive coaching. She's a registered industrial psychologist, an ICF coach, and is passionate about leadership development, particularly on the African continent. She firmly believes that the development of human capital is central to the growth of the continent. Then next up, we have Elaine Pulo, who has been with us for the past 2 sessions. Ma'am Elaine is a retired HR practitioner who worked in the credit information, short-term insurance, FMCG, banking, retail, hospitality industries, as well as the public sector over a period spanning 33 years. She worked for Dun and Bradstreet, Nestle, Allianz, Aegis, Edcon, CNA, Netbank, the Road Assistant Fund, and Table Solutions Group, where she was employed as HR director. Elaine is currently a life and performance coach. She also serves as the FA FABSA 50 and Beyond South Africa NPO board. And she is a director on a women's investment company, Mawa Vune Women's Investments, a trustee and chairperson of the Table Solutions Group, the Honey Trust, and a trustee of the WE Development Trust. Elaine is passionate about working with individuals and teams on a personal and professional level in order to motivate them to achieve their goals. She believes that all human beings have the capacity and will to achieve whatever goal they set for themselves. And then next up, we have Karuma Shah, who has also been with us in the past 2 sessions. Karuma is a G4G mentor with an interest in issues affecting women and youth. She aims to empower and uplift others through sharing her skills, knowledge, and experience. She holds an executive MBA, having completed a dissertation on mentorship and gender diversity. Karima has a background in marketing, product management, and is currently an independent consultant, supporting organizations in identifying business problems and recommending and implementing solutions. She additionally facilitates business skills, training, and teaches yoga part-time. Karima has worked for several multinational organizations and industry leaders, including Singapore Airlines, Emirates Airlines, television production company Edmond Shine, and MTN. In her role at Edmond Shine and MTN, she managed multidisciplinary teams and was responsible for recruiting the best talent for the team. During her tenure at MTN, she worked on graduate development programs, defining the skills needed for her team, recruiting and coaching graduates. And joining us today, all the way from Uganda, is Ethel Guama. Ethel is an experienced specialist with a strong strategic and commercial orientation. She has a track record of success in increasing the effectiveness of management teams, identifying and improving leadership through talent management and leadership development. The latter includes Ethel helping leaders overcome obstacles and develop themselves through coaching and mentoring. She has also assisted in performance management, mobilizing large groups for change, and increasing the effectiveness of the human resource function through HR strategy and skills development. Ethel is certified by LinkedIn for professional CV writing and interview coaching. Ethel is now seeking a stretching career alternative for exposure to different challenges, focusing on enabling social change and contributing to society development. So it is fitting that she has completed numerous John Maxwell programs and is part of the Future Female Leadership Program facilitated by the Uganda Federation of Employers. So those are our panelists for today. And Aka, if you can take it away.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Alice. So we're just going to kick off the panel with the question of, I've heard of induction, Patience, and what is induction? Can you explain why it's important for us as young professionals to get inducted into the workplace?
Hi, morning. Thank you for that question. Induction, what is it? I guess it's a way of people or companies introducing people to the company, in short, if I can just describe it in layman's terms. It's when you get into an organization, every organization has got their culture, every organization has their way of doing things. And an induction period is really trying to orientate graduates, whoever's entering the organization, into what is important. So it will orientate you in terms of HR practices, what the expectations are. It will orientate people in terms of what specific rules might exist in the organization, how and where you can get information, give you some insight into the background of the company if you haven't got sufficient insight at that stage, but they usually will tell you a little bit of the history of the company. They will tell you about your specific area. They will typically get people that are in the organization, and this is assuming it's a formal induction program, because not all the programs are formal, as in sit down classroom type of situation. Sometimes you may be inducted into an organization on an individual basis, but the essence is really to orientate you to the organization.
You're on mute, Aka.
Thank you. Thank you, Patience. That was very, very insightful. Elaine, Elaine mentioned probation and our meeting where we were actually organizing this event, and I think that you're probably the best person to talk about it then, Elaine. Would you like to tell us about probation?
Okay. Probation is a period in which or under which the organization is basically, I'll use the word advisedly, testing you, and you are testing them in terms of fit. Because yes, when you employ people, you are assuming because they have the competencies that they will fit into the organization and be able to do the job. But in order, especially at more senior positions, it's also done at junior positions, but generally also sometimes in middle management and sometimes in senior management, people will put in a probation period in the letter of appointment. And normally it would be, say, about 3 months, but sometimes it can be more, where both the candidate or the new employee and the employer are testing each other in terms of best fit. So that if after 3 months you're not finding each other, you both have the chance to to come out of the agreement or leave the organization. But it's a more structured way of doing it. And obviously, the expectation would be, before we decide that we don't have a fit, we will have been discussing every month or every week, whatever the issue, the situation is, depends on the organization, whether we are finding each other or not, and where we're not finding each other. And also, it's a way of giving, especially the new employee, a way of saying what is working for me and what is not working, with the aim of improving things. The first aim is not to catch you out. The first aim is to make sure that we, our relationship improves. The new employee can perform according to expectations, and they are also finding themselves comfortable in this environment, because if it's not comfortable, they might not be able to perform at their best. So it's a two-way thing for the employer and the employee to find each other. And after 3 months to 6 months, whatever the probation period is, then, a decision could be taken to say, we're not finding each other, then, we can part ways. But it's a neat way of doing it.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any? Oh, Karuma, yes. Karuma wants to add. Your mic is open.
Morning, ladies. So what I have noticed recently, so like some of you, I'm also on the job market. I'm also going through the whole CV and applications and interviews and all of that. So I get it. I'm also there. What I have noticed recently is that there is a trend towards offering contract positions, and this is serving as your probation period. So what the companies are doing is they are saying that it's a 3-month contract with an option to extend, or a 6-month contract with an option to extend. So the purpose of this is similar to the probation that Mom Elaine was talking about. It's to get to see if you fit in. It also gives you an opportunity to see if you're fitting in with the company. If you are in this position, then try to frequently have conversations with your manager or whoever you're reporting into, so that you can establish what their expectations of you are as well, so that you can deliver on that and your contract would get extended or be made permanent. But you might see more contract positions advertised with the option to become permanent. And I've noticed in my experience, the companies are moving away from the probation thing. I think for them, it feels that there's less risk if they take someone on contract, and there's less admin in terms of HR process if they just end your contract, rather than saying you didn't meet the probation requirements. But I know you guys are all awesome, so that you're not going to be in that position. It's going to be ongoing contracts or ongoing permanent positions.
Thank you, Karima.
Can I just, oh, sorry, carry on.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, it's a very sleek way of, as you're saying, of getting away from the probation thing, because yes, it's less onerous, because you can then say, we did say it was a 3-month contract, so we don't have to do anything in terms of the labor law, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it serves the same purpose. But what I do find in my experience is that generally companies sometimes are slack in terms of doing what is required to guide the new employee in terms of what is expected. And then at the end of the period, the employee sometimes is stunned to say, they say, I'm not fitting, but nobody has been telling me. So my advice to people coming into organizations is that you must, and I think Karima, you did talk about it, you must insist that you have, for instance, a job description. I have seen organizations where somebody comes in, they don't have a job description. Therefore, they don't even know what it is that they're supposed to be doing, to the nth degree. Yes, they've been told they have a global view of what it is, but because there are no, for instance, there's no job description and nobody's talking to you on a monthly basis in terms of how you're doing, even on a weekly basis. And then at the end, you're just told that you don't fit, and you're stunned because nobody has spoken to you about it. So I think to a very large extent now, it puts the onus on the new employee to insist on these discussions, because you have a boss and you have the right to go to the boss and say, how am I doing? And don't hide, because when you hide, this is when things happen. If you're not getting it, you must say, I'm not getting it. I need more assistance. I need more training. I need more guidance. where is my job description if you haven't been given one? So those are things that you need to insist on as you walk into this organization.
Does anybody have any questions relating to that? Carry on.
Who must carry on?
Sorry, I keep cutting.
No.
Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, no one has any questions. So, Ethel, you've yet to meet you. So, Ethel, what is your view on being authentic at work, and how do you achieve this?
Hi, everyone. Hi. Yeah, being authentic at work, I think that's the only thing that can actually get you through every day, because ultimately living your values, being who you are is very important. We spend almost 80% of our time at work. So you have to go to work feeling very comfortable in your skin, but also feeling very comfortable with where you're working and what your values are. So I've been talking about induction, and I think the thing that really stands out for me when you're building trust or in an organization during probation is understanding what those values are in an organization and trying to live up to them. But what is ultimate is an organization that actually has values that are aligned to your own personal values. And living those values on a daily is what is important. So being authentic, the way you do your work, the way you relate to people, the way you approach any kind of problems is very, very important. And it speaks to who you are and your values. I think for me, it has worked on several occasions. It has actually helped me build lasting relationships. I am still working with organizations that I last worked with in 2016, just because I was authentic to who I was. So, yeah.
Patience, how do we tread that fine line with our social media and still being ourselves, but not being inappropriate at work with your Instagram and your Twitter?
So that's a really, really important question, especially given the target audience that we have today, who are very much into social media. And I mean, I must admit that it extends beyond, certainly it's not just for millennials. So I think the important thing is to understand the fact that when you've got into an organization, so Ethel just spoke about organizational values and the principles that they uphold. So I think it's really important that, yes, you don't lose yourself. You need to be who you are, but it's very important to understand, because I think these days, many companies have incorporated social media policies into their working practices. So I think you need to understand what are the boundaries that are set out in those social media policies. And typically it would be things where do not feel that you have the right to comment about what goes on in a company, and you decide you will post that on your social media pages. That can very quickly get you into trouble. So I think it's really important to understand that the way I look at it, your social media page is about your social life. However, understand that your social life and what you post can definitely get you into trouble within the organization. So you've got to be sensible while still trying to maintain your authenticity as an individual, who you are. But yes, if you're going to be posting, and I mean, yeah, there are instances where people have posted inappropriate stuff to people, sometimes supposedly inadvertently, and that has left people without employment because it is seen as, well, where do you draw the lines? What was inadvertent? What was not? So before you start posting, make sure that the individual that you're posting information to, if you're sharing rather on any social media platform, make sure that there has been consent from that person to receive certain material. So yeah, I think the long and short is you've got to be very, very careful with social media.
Okay. Karuma, Mikenzo asked a question in the chat box, and it says, what are the common mistakes that interns make for recruiters to not retain their jobs after the probation period?
So I think we spoke to it a bit earlier, but the biggest thing is not understanding what's expected of you. So my advice would be to always have frequent check-ins with your manager to find out what exactly they expect you to be delivering on. So they'll have a set of KPIs, which stands for performance indicators. And you will most likely be measured against these KPIs. So find out what these KPIs are and how you can achieve them, and have those check-ins to see how you're tracking against it. Sometimes what happens is you'll find yourself very busy at work, but you're not doing anything that is contributing to these KPIs. So you're not actually delivering, even though you're busy the whole day. So find out what these KPIs are and how you're tracking against them and how you can better deliver against this. Another key thing is, don't be afraid to put your hand up if you don't understand something or if you're struggling with something. And it might sometimes feel daunting to ask your manager these questions, but in my experience, it's always better to ask than to not deliver. So if you're not sure of something, ask for help. That's what they're there to do. Their role is to support you. So enable them to support you by asking questions and making sure that you understand what's required. And for me, that's the two key things.
Thank you. Patience has something to add.
So I think on top of what Karima has said, which is absolutely right, that you must understand what you're hired for, what you're expected to do. But I'm sure you've all heard the adage that you don't hire for skills, you hire for attitude. And I think that's one of the things that makes people fall short, is coming in with such an attitude that you are not teachable. And what happens with many companies, if they have a sense, if your boss has a sense that in the first 3 months, this person is really not accessible, they're not teachable, they have a know-it-all type of attitude, they just got a wrong attitude altogether. Often that will be the reason why people will be, because I mean, people can, if you don't know, I mean, I don't think any company expects that in the first 3 months, you're absolutely shining on every single KPI. They are prepared to teach, but if you're not teachable, then they're not going to invest the time in you.
Karima?
Absolutely. I was applauding there, but absolutely agree with Patience. I think I should have mentioned, but my assumption is that we focus on this as well as part of our lessons in building trust. So also take with you the lessons from your Girls for Girls modules. Building trust, building that reputation, understanding what your audience needs from you, art of communication. Come back to these lessons and take it with you, and you will do well.
Thanks. Elaine?
Sorry, I wanted to add on the issue of authenticity. This is a very difficult one because, I mean, I can think I'm authentic by being very aggressive. I'm being myself, but I don't realize I'm being aggressive because I'm trying to be assertive, but I come across as aggressive. So this thing, it's a fine line. I always said sometimes, even as a very senior executive in the organization, I always felt like sometimes I had to almost temper myself down in order to be able to reach other people. And it takes, I think it takes a lot of maturity to be able to do that, which sometimes young people don't necessarily have. And to temper yourself to the extent where, sometimes you feel like shouting at someone, because they're doing something that's irritating or whatever, but because you're at work and you understand that there are values and there are ways of doing it. There's a culture in the organization where we don't shout at people, or where we don't swear, as an example, or something like that, or where we don't throw things across the room. There are companies where these things happen, but it's not becoming of a person. And if your manager calls you to a meeting, which is what a patient was talking about, a bad attitude as an example. So to a very large extent, we need to be very careful in terms of how we come across as people. And almost, I'm not saying change yourself, but there are times when you have to almost eat humble pie, and you need to know when that is. When is it the time to eat humble pie? When is it the time to really stand up? And how do I do it? I don't have to be rude to make a point. I can still make a point. I can still go to my manager and tell them I'm unhappy, but with respect. And these are things that are very, very difficult for a lot of people, because the person will tell you, but I was angry, so I did what I did because I was angry and I was being myself. So yeah, very, very, difficult things to traverse in the workplace. And sometimes we have to almost temper ourselves down. But it doesn't mean you're selling yourself out, but you're doing it for a good reason. And at the right time, you may be able to raise whatever it is that is making you unhappy when you are not so angry. So in other words, to know when to do it and how to do it is very critical.
Ethel, you have something to add?
Yeah, I think for me, we've always spoken about IQ, we've spoken about emotional intelligence, but what is important currently, especially for the workplace, is culture intelligence, us understanding what the workplace is like, what you have found, knowing your team, knowing your leader. You reading the workplace is very, very important. It guides on so many things. It guides on dress code. I just want to address the issue that came up in the chat room about dress code. But dress code is more than just appearance. It's about your persona. And most people actually look at us as ladies. The minute you enter a room, you actually define your presence in that room, your power in that room. So it's very important that you understand how should I dress when I'm going to work, or when I'm making a presentation. How should I, what kind of appearance do I need to relate to people? If my team is having any kind of relational issues, how do I address that? So the most important thing that is coming through today is the need for cultural intelligence. We need to know who we relate to, how we relate to them, and how we make an impact as individuals. And by doing that, you can actually do almost anything. You can influence, you can make impactful decisions, you can stand out. So you can be empowered on so many levels. So yeah, culture intelligence is very, very important, and it helps individuals get through all the hurdles.
Thank you, Ethel. Patience, you had your hand up. I'm not sure if Ethel already covered what you wanted to say, but I do have a question here from Priscilla, and it says, if you are faced with a situation where you get a job and there is no job description, and you don't have any defined roles, how do you approach your boss about this without sounding rude?
Can I answer that, Aka?
No problem.
Can I?
No problem. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. I was going to say, in the first place, I can understand. I've never been able to understand how you can employ somebody and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So my attitude would be towards that. I've helped a lot of people who've come to me to say, they are expecting me to do things, but they never even gave me a job description. And I've been able to intervene. And the question I always ask the person on the other side, the manager or the HR person, how do you expect the person to know? You tell me. And the answer is, they can't answer because it's a no-brainer. And in my view, you could actually even see it as an unfair practice. How do you hold me accountable when you haven't even told me how you want me to be accountable? It's crazy, in other words. So if you come into an organization and there's no job description, you have the right to insist on one. And anybody who says you are being rude for asking for it then doesn't even know why they are there as a manager or why they are there as an HR person. That's one of the first things that you do when you employ somebody, is to give them their job description and give them their KPIs as a manager.
Patience.
Can I just add to that? I think, as Elaine was talking, I was just reflecting on the fact that when you apply for a job, the reason you apply is because you've come across a job description, right? And you've scanned that job description and the aspects that you're interested in. So one way perhaps to do it, I mean, I haven't done it myself, but I'm saying, I think what could work, because when you go for that interview, you've got a copy of that job description. And hence you're going forward for that particular position. I think one way, and I suppose it's just a way of saying, perhaps let's get a bit smarter, all of us, to say, when you've interviewed for a position, hold on to what you've seen in terms of the job description. And when you have a discussion with that line manager, perhaps what you can do is pull out that job description and say, when I applied for the role, this is the job description that I responded to. I wanted to know, are these aspects still pertinent to the role? Has anything changed? And if there is anything that's changed, what is it? And then help me through what would then be key performance indicators for you, Mr. and Mrs. Line Manager. I think that could also work.
Alice just mentioned that a lot of student jobs don't have a job description and that this leaves room for exploitation. Karima, do you have any advice when in a situation like this?
So I actually have an example of this. So I worked in television production for a while, and there is a role on most productions which is called a runner. Basically, the runner does whatever you tell them to do. So there's no real job description. Like there's an expectation that they'll do deliveries and pickups, but wherever someone needs help, they call the runner to help them. So you could probably Google this job description, but in my experience, most runners never have job descriptions. It's sort of like an intern, but making a bit more money. And I think with this, and also there were questions from, I just want to check now, Sylvia, I think, as well as Annette earlier. The answer is the same. So even though you don't have a job description, have regular chats with your manager, but make sure that it's a formal chat. So set up some time, even if it's 15 minutes, take that time out, check in with them about what you need to be doing. Sometimes it's just a situation of the manager feels that the HR process is too much of admin. So if they can get someone in without doing the job description, why not? But they still know what they want you to do. So set up time, have a formal discussion with them about what you need to be delivering on. If they're not clear on that, maybe also ask them what they need to be delivering on, and how you can support that. Because I think that puts you in a position to be performing well in the eyes of your manager, and that would help you to stay on in response to Annette and
Sylvia.
Sorry, Sylvia. I'm scrolling through the chat here. But for me, I think communication is always very important. So communicating frequently and finding out how you're doing, how you're performing, and what you can be doing better as well. I think that will help you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? It's just me talking here. Just turn on your microphone and your video if you can. Nobody? Okay.
But it's not,
Alice.
it's not necessarily a question, just something to add to what or just a follow-up, right? When it comes to student jobs, because there's no job description, you're kind of expected to do anything. And in most cases, when you do speak up and say, well, I don't like how this is done, or maybe we could do this in a different way, or maybe you can be more specific in terms of the types of things that I need to do, you run the risk of actually losing the job, because they know that every student, as students, we're trying to make money and just have side hustles, because the allowance maybe that we receive from bursaries, funding is not necessarily enough. So they know that they have that upper hand, that if you don't want it, there's most probably another student who is willing to take up the job despite whatever working conditions exist. So that's sort of like a disadvantage where, yes, I could speak up, but I run the risk of losing the job, and they know very well that they can be able to get another student.
Can I just add to that, just because I think, and then I think Faith has a question. So I understand that there is this thing that students are definitely exploited, but I guess the question I want to ask as students is, you know, if you look at the labor practices in general, there are certain things that would be deemed exploitation, or and I think in that respect, I guess what happens now with people when you're younger, there is this whole concept of my rights, and absolutely I advocate for people's rights. But I do think sometimes when we're young and eager, and we sometimes overextend the principle of what are my rights. So I guess what I'm getting to is, there's a very fine line in terms of how you describe that exploitation. What do you mean by exploitation? I think everybody who goes into a role, there's some really admin, some really gunky pieces of work that you have to do that nobody enjoys. But I guess the question that you need to ask yourself is, by doing this, what does it do for me? Does it take away from your self-esteem? What is it doing for you? Why are you refusing to do? Because often people would say, I've seen people that are working in perhaps clothing stores, and they've got to fold clothing all day, and clients or customers come in, and just when you finish folding the pack, then these folks have just undone everything that you've done, and people begin to complain that, I'm doing menial work. I think the important thing is to say to yourself, what are the lessons that I learned out of this? Sometimes it's about tenacity. Sometimes it's about just being able to say, okay, how much can I take? It's really just stretching you. And sometimes that doesn't mean you're being exploited because someone's asked you to pack the shelf 100 times. It is the nature of the role. But I think too often people have this, that, no, that's beneath me. I wanted to be the manager, and now I'm having to do all of this. You're not there yet. So I think it's about there's an element of, there's a balance. You absolutely don't go into situations where you are exploited, but also look at what is that definition of being exploited.
Faith, and then I'll ask Elaine to put in her input. Faith.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists and all those that managed to dial in. My name is Faith again from Uganda. My question is around how does one manage culture issues, like if you've worked with multinationals and for a bit, and then you switch to an organization that is probably in country. I'm just giving my own scenario. I worked with 2 multinationals, and then I switched to a local organization. So the way things were the way things are done, I'm just shocked that there's a level of acceptance of bad customer care. Even my boss seems to be comfortable. So every time you try to bring on the new ideas that would help change the culture, basically, change so many things, you're looked at very badly. And yet at the same time, I don't want to rub my boss badly. So yes, it can be a bit of a challenge, but then I would like to know how one would handle such an issue. Because I know, like, for global organizations, there is zero tolerance to certain things, which is what I have learned, and that's what I know in my work. But when I move to a new organization, especially Uganda, it's a Uganda-based organization, there's a certain level of acceptance of people walking late to a meeting. Bad customer care is somewhat acceptable. And I'm like, oh my God. And you see, even the boss will say nothing about some of those things. Procrastination. And yet we are in a service industry in a competitive environment. How do I handle such a situation?
Karima looks like she has an answer.
So Faith, I think it's less to do with the fact that you're comparing a global organization to a local organization, and more to do with the culture of different organizations. And you could find two global organizations with completely different cultures. So you gave the example of tardiness and being late. This could possibly just be the culture of the organization that you're working in. And as you go through the interview processes, your probation, it's also an opportunity for you to see if the culture is a good fit. And deciding if you fit in within the organization. You could get another local organization that operates very similarly to the cultures that you've been accustomed to. So I wouldn't consider it local versus global. I would just think about it that each organization has their own culture, and these are factors inherent in the organization's culture. And I think as you get to know yourself better, it's very important to find a culture that you fit with as well. Unfortunately, you don't always get to see this through the job spec and the interview, but while you are working there, you will get an understanding of the culture, or an in-depth understanding with the culture. And you also need to be honest with yourself as to whether or not this culture aligns with you and your values. And if it doesn't, I would advise that you look externally for other opportunities.
Thanks, Karima. Elaine.
Sorry, I wanted to respond to two things, and I'll start with the one that Karima is talking about, and the issue of culture. My experience, as you know, I worked in 10 organizations in my life, so I have seen a lot of things and in different industries. So for my sins, my 9th organization, I decided to go and work in a semi-government organization. And all my life, I had worked in private organizations in South Africa. So they're not necessarily multinationals, they're South African organizations. And the culture that I found in the semi-government organization was shocking. Exactly what Ethel was describing, where there was tardiness, where senior managers were doing, I don't even want to talk about it because it was disgusting. And when I tried to intervene as the senior HR people, you could see that they were not interested. This is how they do things here. And I was shocked because I had never worked in an environment like that in South Africa. I'd worked in organizations where there was proper, behavior, there's culture, there are values that we abide by. There are rules, there are ways that we do things, and there are ways in which, there are things that are not acceptable, but here they were acceptable. Guess what? I didn't even last a year there. I decided exactly as Karima was saying, you then have to decide, I don't fit here. because this is not who I want to be. And it was shocking for me, because I thought I would be able to go and give in the public sector for once in my life before I retired. But it didn't work, because it was the way the people were. And it is sad to have to say, and I know it's a very touchy issue. This was an organization, a public sector organization run by Black people. And I had never seen anything like it. And I was one of the senior executives in this organization, and I'd never seen anything like it. So there is something to be said about how we, as Africans as well, look at business practice. And it's a topic on its own, where we need to also check ourselves in terms of what we allow and what we don't allow. So I leave it at that, because it's fraught with a lot of things. Then my other contribution would be about the issue of how, when you come into an organization, you become you do everything, and you feel you're being exploited because you're not doing exactly what you were employed to do. When I started working, I worked as a personnel officer. I don't even know if you guys know what a personnel officer is, but that was years ago. And I had a postgrad qualification. But the first thing I did in my job was to file. And, at a point I thought, my goodness, I didn't go to university and do a postgrad, and then have to file. But you know what? The strangest thing happened. As I was filing, I was going through the information in the files, which is part of what HR does, isn't it? And I was looking at the information in the files, and I was getting information. And by the time I got into the real job, I already knew what the lay of the land was, so to speak. So this very thing that I thought was demeaning at a point is the very thing that I found, geez, it was useful, because I could see, what goes into a file, what are the most important, documents when you are in HR, and what are the benefits and how do they work, and blah, 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 and a lot of information. So what I'm saying here is sometimes exactly, I think what somebody else said, I can't remember, is the very thing that might help you going forward. It might seem like, geez, I'm being demeaned, or I'm not being considered as the real deal here. That's why they make me fine. But sometimes it turns out that it is the very thing that will help you. And that's the very organization that for me made me who I was from many areas of my career. I was able to launch myself from there into other bigger things.
Thank you. I hope everybody's learned a few lessons from the stories that Karuma and Elaine are bringing forward. Prasi has a question, and it says, if I feel that I am adding more value to the organization than the remuneration or level I am at in the organization, how can I best initiate negotiations for a pay raise or promotion without stirring the waters? Would anybody like to speak to that?
I just put an answer in the
Okay.
text, because the interesting thing is, and I must be honest, when I saw that question, I had to chuckle, because, and I think Elaine and Karima could bear me out, and anybody else who's been working for a while, we always have this perception that, my goodness, I'm doing more and I'm not necessarily being paid equitably. My only question is, are you having regular performance discussions? If you're having those regular performance reviews, and it is evident in those regular performance reviews that you're shooting the lights out in terms of the value add, then I think that is an opportunity for you to raise the question around reward. Because sometimes you might feel that you're adding value, more value than what you're being paid for or the level that you're at, but the organization unfortunately doesn't feel exactly the same way. And then it becomes a very difficult discussion to say, okay, so your perception is more value, but that's your perception. What do others feel about it? And that's why I say that it's important to then make reference to your performance discussions, because that's an opportunity, I think, to say, okay, here you've rated me 5+ if you're on a rating scale of 5, which means I'm really, really doing well. So what does that then mean from a remuneration perspective, from a reward perspective? What can you add? What are the opportunities for promotion? Rather than, I think salary is always a very difficult discussion. I know people are getting more and more brave, and I guess somebody said to me that men usually will demand exactly what they want. Women still have that challenge in terms of demanding what they believe they're worth. But yeah, Elaine, I'd be interested to hear your comment.
I could have put it better than what you've just done, Patience, in terms of the performance discussion that happens on an ongoing basis. And that should be exactly where you launch from. However, in some instances, these are not the norm in some organizations, and then it becomes a difficult thing, because now whose word is it? If you're not being performance managed, then I think it becomes difficult. And also, I think I've always felt that organizations were not transparent enough in terms of pay scales in organizations. And that's the other thing. When pay scales are out there and everybody, I mean, it should be there for everybody to see. This is what we pay for this level, so that you know where to peg yourself, because sometimes people don't even know what they are comparing themselves to. You hear somebody say this and that, somebody else says that, and then you think, geez, I'm being underpaid. But maybe for your job, your scale is right. But because these things are not transparent, you then labor under false impressions. And that is why organizations need to be more transparent about these things, so that you know, am I at the big, at the top of my level? Am I in the middle, or am I at the beginning? And if I'm not where I think I should be, my manager should be able to tell me from my performance that because of ABCD, you are still in the middle or wherever of the pay scale. But these things, I believe, have to be transparent. That's all I could add to what you've just said, Patience.
Patience has another thing to say.
No, I think I mean, I couldn't have said it better. I think you're absolutely right. And from the time that you may have exited the corporate world in a formal capacity, I think that is exactly the point, is that pay scales, the issue around remuneration is not transparent. So you labor sometimes under the false perception that I'm being underpaid, but in fact, that might be the top, that might be you might be at the top end of your bracket.
Exactly.
And so they say to themselves, as far as they're concerned, you're being fairly paid, but because you don't know, and a very important thing for people to understand, that in some organizations, it's actually taboo to discuss salary amongst yourselves.
Well, can I just say something about that, Patience, quickly? It's taboo because people talk about it precisely because it is not transparent. So what do you expect people to be doing? If you give people the information, they won't be talking about it among themselves. So everybody knows, it's a known thing. But companies shoot themselves in the foot by making this a secret. And obviously it then raises these things where people are talking behind the company, so to speak. So for me, it's clear. Make it transparent. Why not?
Exactly, because I think once it's transparent, you can then say, if, for example, you see that you're only at the middle or the midpoint of your bracket, you're able to say to your line manager in your discussion, for me to get to the next level, what would it take? What do I need to do different to what I'm doing now?
Precisely. Exactly. That's the more useful discussion.
Now we're speaking about pay scale. What do you think about these websites like payscale.com or .co.za? I keep on seeing every time you look up, like, okay, I want to become an HR manager, and I've been to university and I got my honors in industrial psychology at this university, and then you see all these things on pay scale and it's like, should I be asking for that much, or should I be taking it with a grain of salt?
Nobody's answering. So I think what it is, it depends who's included in those surveys. Because sometimes companies also, and that's one thing you need to be mindful of, companies hide behind your salary is market related, but you have to ask yourself, who was the benchmark? Who did you compare against? And so that takes us back to that point around transparency, because they'll tell you that we've benchmarked salaries, but can we have a look at that report to see which companies were included in the survey? Are you comparing like for like, or what is the basis of making your decisions? And unfortunately, in my working life, I haven't come across people where they will give you that information in a very transparent manner. So I look at those things as, yeah, okay, it's nice to have some sort of guide, but believe me, every company's got their own practices.
Yeah, patients are also, I also think, sorry, Aka, can I just say this quickly?
Yes,
Fortunately, my experience has been that every organization I've worked in, we always did salary surveys every year to make sure that we're competitive. So from a survey point of view, I feel, because for instance, if you are in hospitality, you can't compare yourself with an organization that's not hospitality as an example. So, in the surveys, you're always pitted against other like organizations so that you end up, your survey speaks to you as a company that operates in a specific environment. So generally in the hospitality environment, these are the salaries for these positions. And yes, sometimes, financial people, yes, you could actually even maybe pit yourselves against banks and other financial institutions. But generally, it is like for like. But what my criticism would be that companies don't share this information with employees. And therefore makes the survey questionable, because if you don't share it, why are you not sharing it? What are you scared of? Basically, if you're treating people equitably, then you shouldn't be hiding, because these things are available, they're there. And therefore you can actually go and show the person that, yes, for this job, look at where we are pitched as an organization, because you can actually see your organization against other organizations. So these things are there. It's only in the way they are applied that is problematic.
Thank you. How important is the code of conduct when it comes to settling into an organization? Karima.
So I think it's very important to understand the code of conduct as well as the culture within the organization. You might find that there's clashes between the two. And if there are, always look to the code of conduct, because that's the rules, that's the written rules. That's what would support you if you ever needed to check something. That should be your guiding light. So typically, I know a lot of organizations would take you through this during your induction. Alternatively, it should be made available through an intranet site, so an internal website where you can find all your company's policies. But try to get hold of this, try to familiarize with yourself with it, because this is really your guiding light as to how you should be behaving. There's typically nothing strange in there. They would have stuff like, I know a lot of companies have gift policies. So if a client gives you something, it can't be over a certain value. So familiarize yourself with it so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you've broken the rules and you are now in trouble.
Thank you. Does anybody have any? Elaine?
Yes, I was just going to add, I agree 100% with Karima. I was also going to add that one of the challenges that we find is that because organizations sometimes don't share the rules and the regulations or the codes of conduct of the organization, or even workshop them so that people understand what they actually mean. Because sometimes something that you read might not be exactly what is meant, and maybe you misunderstand it. And then you find yourself in a disciplinary session and you don't understand why you're there. And this is where now, if for instance you get fired and you go to the CCMA, do you know that you will win the case if you can prove that nobody explained to me what this thing means? This is how I interpreted it. And nobody took the time to tell me what it actually meant in this environment, because it can mean anything to anybody in any environment. But in your specific environment, what do you mean by this rule? So, and this is where sometimes companies fall short and they lose in this FSCCMA, because it's now an unfair labor practice that you expected the person to know when you didn't really share with them and explain what you actually meant. So it's just a rider I want to put in there to say these things, and also for your own sanity. If you don't understand the rule, you must ask what it actually means. But I'm just saying organizations fall short when they go to the CCMA for not having even workshop what they mean by these rules.
Thank you. Does anybody have any further questions for our panelists? Just turn on your microphone and start speaking. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's any more questions. So I think that we can close off now. Thank you so much to everybody who attended, even this session.
Sorry,
or
Aka,
yes.
Sorry. Something just came to my head, and I don't know, something says I must share it.
Please share.
I'm talking about having relationships at work.
Yes,
is
please.
One that can be a difficult one. You know, a young person comes in and somebody, and they, they don't know that it's wrong to, in some instances, to have relationships close to people that you work with. And I just think that it's something that people coming into the workplace must be aware of, that, sometimes they may not have shared it in the organization, but generally it's frowned upon to have a relationship in the office. And sometimes it's a sexy young lady coming in and thinks that, I don't know, for some reason, and I'm saying young girls are like that as a rule, but, having a relationship with a boss, as an example, or anybody else who's not in the boss, not a boss, but who works with you, it's frowned upon in organizations, and you can be disciplined for it if it's found out, in some instances. So it's things like that sometimes nobody tells you about. And maybe in the rules, it's not explicit enough, and you don't know that there are boundaries when it comes to that. I don't know if anybody wants to add to it.
Can I add that I think, yeah, absolutely, in terms of relationships, be very mindful, because some companies, it's actually in the code of conduct that it's not permitted. So you need to make sure that you're aware of that. The other thing, apart from just when Elaine talked about relationships, is someone asked, just in terms of behavior within an organization, what is acceptable, what is not. So I'm sure you all know that in many organizations, okay, COVID has probably changed that somewhat, but still, some people do still get together face to face. And remember, it's that thing, when you're invited to the company social, don't say to yourself, I want to go there and be my authentic self. So, on a weekend, I really enjoy having my drinks and I go for a double whiskey and I get absolutely plastered. Believe me, in your social setting, it might be acceptable. Within a business space, even if you see your boss getting absolutely tanked, don't do it. Actually, just say to yourself, this is work. Say to yourself, I'm not in my social environment, because what happens, as we know, alcohol can lower your inhibitions. Next thing, you're saying all the wrong things. And I honestly want to say to you, with experience, I worked for an alcohol company. People still watch other people. And the next day, the discussion is, oh my goodness, did you see patients? Oh, good heavens. And some of that stuff is being noted in your performance review. You don't even know about it. But people have noted how you behaved, what you might have said. And you thought, oh, we were all there. We were all drinking. We were all having fun. Be careful where it resurfaces.
Yes, Patience. Now you make me think also of the thing about sexual harassment. Sometimes as a new employee, you're too scared to speak up. And especially females, now that we're talking to women, it's one of the things that women encounter, most women encounter in the workplace. And it's something that you must never, ever entertain. Even if it means you're going to lose your job, that one you must never, ever entertain, because it's never going to end well, whichever way you look at it. When it rears its ugly head, you confront it, you report it. And if they don't do anything about it, I would even suggest that you then go to the CCMA about it, because that one has actually made women so susceptible to abuse in the workplace because they're too scared to lose their jobs. And this, as women, we need to fight with everything that we have.
Thank you. Thank you. Should we talk about unions just for a quick second? Speaking of reporting channels, when your HR manager doesn't want to do anything or you're too afraid, what role do unions play?
Unions play a very important role, Aqua. In fact, you raise a very important point. But sometimes you find that because of your level or your job, not everybody is a member of the union. But the truth of the matter is, even if you're not a member of the union, you can go to someone in the organization to help you, to represent you, even a union member, even if you're, a union rep, even if you're not a union person. So they always, in fact, there always is somebody that you can go to in the organization to help represent you. And most rules in the organization say that if you're a unionized person, you go to your shop steward. If you're not non-union, you can choose anyone in the organization to assist you. So that's always open to anybody in the organization. And unions, yes, play a very important role when it comes to this. They do. They're very necessary, I'll say evil in quotes.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything to add or any more questions to ask?
So just a topic that I just want us to go into. It's not necessarily something that's overt or necessarily spoken, but the pull her down syndrome that exists in the workplace, and how to mitigate that and how to move around that.
Say again, you're talking about what? Down syndrome?
Pull her down syndrome, where women in the workplace are trying to work against each other.
Pull her down. I thought you were saying Down syndrome. So I'm like, yo, what's Down syndrome got to do, Shane? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry. The pull her down.
Yes.
Oh, in fact, you're raising a point that I did want to make. One of the things that Africans invariably do, because yes, we Africans walk into white organizations in the main. And do you know that whites have, they form themselves into groups, and they do things together, from the workplace to the weekend, and they talk about work things on the weekend, and they strategize how they're going to help each other and how to achieve whatever they want for themselves, and they help each other. The one thing that Africans don't do is exactly that. We are normally quite isolated because some of the times you're the only African in there. And sometimes you feel great because you can tell people, I'm the only African at the board, or I'm the only African executive. Now, what that does, it does isolate you. And when you need to be, to have people around you to help you, it becomes very difficult. And that is why maybe the point you're raising is that even women, African women or women of any description, we tend not to club together to assist each other, which is also a phenomenon among Africans. We don't do that. And while white people get together, they formulate strategies and they help each other get on in the workplace. And we don't do enough of that. And we need to be doing enough of that to help each other and help each other sort out problems at work.
Indeed, Ma'am Elaine, I agree. With as Black people, sometimes, like you said, we take pride in saying, I'm the only African person that is in this organization, that is in this workplace, whereas that works at times to our disadvantage.
In fact, most times, not even at times, most times it works to your disadvantage because you can be isolated.
Definitely.
And you are easy, yeah, and then you are easy to deal with, you know, because there's only one of you. But if you have other people around you and you strategize and help each other, even, you know, I actually, I'm just thinking now about my last job. For a very long time, I was the only woman at that level. And I was the only African woman, in fact, the only woman of any description. And then there were African men, and I say African specifically, and I'm not discriminating, I'm saying it for a purpose. And there were men in there who are African who, when I needed help, wouldn't come to my assistance. And for me, it just said, you see, even with among, you know, the genders, there's a problem. But if there were more women like me in this place, which is what we should be fighting for, bring on more people like you know, so that you can actually relate and they are relatable to them. Then you can do things, you can change things with more people. But if there's only one of you, you are easy to isolate.
Thank you. Karuma?
I just want to add to what Elaine is saying, and it's a very real situation that you will find in the workplace. And maybe thinking about how you would handle it if you are in the situation, because it does affect your promotion opportunities. It affects you from even being considered for other opportunities. And something that someone said to me once really stood out. And what they said to me was, your work doesn't speak for itself. You need to speak for it sometimes. So realize when you do need to speak for your work. Yes, perform at your optimum. Make sure that you're delivering, but also make sure that the people who matter know that you are delivering as well. Because when you're not in the club, then the club needs to understand your worth. And sometimes the only way they understand it is by you showing it to them. So don't be afraid to highlight the things that you are doing and the things that you have achieved to more senior personnel within the organization.
True, very true.
Thank you. Patience?
I think just on that point around Africans not supporting each other, and I think this is more evident, or at least is very evident in a South African context, where you know, everything that Karima said, Elaine has said is absolutely true. You end up being isolated. But one of the things, and the reason, someone asked the question in the chat, and I said, sometimes it's about our own insecurities. Sometimes it's about the way we ourselves have been socialized. Because if you look at Black people in general, if you start a side hustle, and many of you might still be in the university, you start a side hustle, you might get your friends to support you. But usually what our attitude tends to be is that, why are you making money? Which means I could also make the same amount of money. And that unfortunately leads to us not being in a position to support each other. Instead of saying, oh, wow, Elaine has started something. Elaine, how can I support you? What do you need? Can I help you market? We instead look at, oh, let me see, what was the concept? Let me see, how easily replicable is that concept? Can I do it for myself such that I don't have to part with my money to pay Elaine, but let another white person come along and start selling you the same jewelry that maybe Elaine was selling? You're very quick to support. And I've seen that in corporates, that you find that somebody else does exactly what another Black person would do, and you'd find people are more leaning towards the white, a person of a different color in the organization, rather than saying, oh, wow, Patience actually really did a good job. How do I rally behind her? How do I take some lessons from what she's done? Instead, that gets ignored and not celebrated enough.
It's true. So true. It's sad, but true.
Yeah.
We just have a question here from Kristen. It says, how do you navigate the workplace as a new employee with the new normal of working remotely?
Can I answer that one? Because I've just been through a process where we ran a grad program, and unfortunately, for a particular organization, they started in January last year, I think towards the end of January. So they literally had 1 and a bit months in the org. In fact, they didn't even have 1 and a bit, because unfortunately, when COVID started, they were impacted almost immediately as an organization. And so they started working from home. It has been quite difficult from a perspective of establishing relationships. Unfortunately, whether you're working remotely or you're working in the organization, as in you're turning up on a daily basis, the rules are not different. So you still need to establish, what are your expectations? What do you expect of me in terms of my productivity? What are the projects I'm working in? What are the delivery dates? Because I'll give you an example. One of the people that are in this thing, one day somebody called and said, oh, I had a call with so-and-so. I'm so sure they were watching Skop, Skip and Donner in the background, because I could hear all this bang, bang, bang on the TV. So unfortunately, I think we think I'm working from home. I don't need to. Yes, we don't dress because maybe we don't put our cameras on, but we think also I can be very lax. I don't have to keep the working hours. Unfortunately, what corporates do, even with working remotely, productivity is expected of. So don't have a very different attitude. Go in there and say to yourself, let me understand, what are the expectations? When do I need to deliver? What are the meetings that I'm expected to attend? Just what does my output need to be? Remember, you are employed. The fact that you're working from home is neither here nor there.
Thank you, Patience. Karuma, you look like you want to say something.
No, I just want to agree with Patience, and I think it's been a big issue for hiring managers. And maybe taking us back to last week's sessions on interviews, I was a little touched when someone asked me, but how will I make sure that I deliver? And I thought to myself, whether it's COVID or not, I will deliver. And I wasn't prepared to be asked that question, but maybe also think about it from your perspective as to how you structure your days. Because I think with working from home, you do have a bit more flexibility. As Patience said, maybe you're not going to shower before you start working. It will be mid-work day or something. Whatever it is, your routine's going to be different. So just think about how you change your routine and how you structure it. It may or may not come up during your interviews, but definitely something to think about, how you're going to allocate your time to make sure that you are delivering on your objectives.
Does anybody have more bombs to drop like Alice did, that ignited rather a fantastic conversation that clearly needs to be had? Clearly, Alice and I have some more events to plan. Alice?
Sorry, I just wanted to, oh my God. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm having a bit of a connection problem.
You're
My
on
apologies.
mute.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, it's just something Patience had touched on, where but it was more from a racial standpoint, where if a point or something is done by a person of color or an African person, it's not as taken as more seriously as it would if it comes from their white counterparts. But I just want to bring it back to more from the gender point of view, where something may be said, as a woman, you say something and it's not necessarily taken as seriously as it would if it comes from the male perspective. How does one deal with that? My other question is, as an intern or a graduate entering into a graduate program where you share ideas or you share say an idea and your superior now lifts that idea and presents it as your own idea, how do you address that?
Would anybody like to speak on that? Elaine?
Yeah, the issue of somebody stealing your idea, it becomes very difficult because now it's going to be their word against yours, you know. So it is very difficult unless it's something that you have written down and done a presentation on, and you have proof that I actually came up with this concept or with this idea. It's going to be very difficult, I have to tell you, to prove, because somebody can say, but no, it was my idea, now prove it. And you say, no, it was my idea, and you told just them. And maybe sometimes these things need to be shared in groups so that, yes, if something like that happens, somebody else can say, no, but that was Alice's idea. But if it's a one-on-one, it's very difficult to prove unless you have documentation to prove it. And people always do these things, and you just need to be aware that when you share things, there are some people who will take them for their own, you know. But the thing is, how I've dealt with some of these things is, if I know I told the person and then they used it as their own idea, I've never stopped to go back to the person. Not necessarily that they're going to go and withdraw it, but they know. I've told them, and I say to them, but you know, that was my idea. And they can say no, you know, they can't say that to me because they know, but they may not withdraw it from whoever they're now selling it to. But the point I want to make is that be very circumspect, be very careful about ideas that you just give out freely, because people are always looking for ideas, and they will steal it from anywhere, actually. And some people have no qualms. And then your second idea was, your second question was about what?
About
males.
male and
They
female.
are
males.
Yeah.
Alice, that is a thing that we're going to have to contend with forever until we work on the males themselves, because we don't have to work on ourselves. We know what is the right thing, but males need to be worked on. So what is, the challenge is for us as women to talk to our counterpart, to our friends who are male, to talk to our husbands, to talk to our sons, and to basically show them these things, because if nobody talks to them about it, they think it's a thing to do. But also in the workspace, I think there is always an opportunity to, because sometimes, yes, you get used, you come close to certain male people, and you have to tell them these things. And sometimes they are like, but do you think that's what we do? And they're shocked that this is what they do, because they don't realize they're doing it. But all of us need to make it a thing that we are going to go out and change the environment by raising these things when they appear with our male counterparts. The more we talk about it, the more it will change. Will it change tomorrow? I doubt it, but we never stop. We shouldn't stop. We should, when we see it, we must call it out. That's the best that we can do.
Thank you. Ethel, you have some input to add.
Yeah, so for me, in regards to the idea, I'm actually glad for this question. Really, because when you're growing and you're moving up the ladder in terms of career growth, this is going to happen a lot. It's going to happen more often, but what to do really is to be graceful about it, and do not react, because in most cases, we are only in control of our emotions. So the way you react to someone stealing your idea is going to actually speak a lot to the individual that you are. So this has happened to me, and my approach at first was wrong, and I worked on it a lot. And the next time it did happen, I actually had to approach the person, speak to them individually, and ask them why it did happen. But also learning from your mistake. I think it's the session on Is it courageous leadership? Well, we listened to Nancy's video on your village, growing your village. So there are things that actually we're going to be exposed to in life, especially when we're in a workplace. But what you learn from them is very important. So for me, the time that my idea was stolen, what I learned from that was I had to know that in case this happens again, how am I going to react? But also I learned what to do so that my idea is not stolen the next time. So it's just important that we relate to those kind of scenarios. Your ideas are going to be taken by so many people. Your credit is going to be someone else's, yet it's meant to be yours. But your reaction is very, very important. Your emotions need to be controlled. The right approach usually is approach the person. The direct confrontation, it's not confrontation per se, but speaking about that particular instance helps. But also knowing that next time, if I have an idea, how do I approach it? Who do I share it with? Because you having other people speak on your behalf in a room is also important. So keeping your friends close, but also keeping your enemies closer is a way to approach this kind of scenarios. And I wouldn't want to say that people that steal your ideas are your enemies, but it's another way of looking at it and appreciating that probably they're also in a place where they need a bit of credibility, but how do you take your credibility back as an individual? Yeah.
Can I just come in about the thing about your demeanor? When somebody does something that really angers me, I think it's high time as women we do show anger. You know, I think we have to show the anger. And part of why we are where we are is because we've always been nice about things and very, we don't show the anger. And I think there are times when the anger has to come out and you call a spade, because really this is what other people expect us to do. They'll do nothing about it. They'll be nice about it. No, I think it's time that and I'm not saying be rude, but there is a way of showing your anger by showing it, and I'm angry, and even say, I am angry. I am angry you stole my idea, so that people know. This niceness about how we've been socialized to be nice ladies and nice little girls, I don't think in the main has taken us far, Ethel. And I'm just saying this very nicely because I've lived long enough to see that this niceness doesn't really get us far. So we need to show anger. And there's nothing wrong in showing anger. We have to show it. But there's a way in which we do it. You don't swear, as an example, but you say, I am angry. And yes, the person must know I'm angry. And they will know not to do it next time, hopefully, from my anger. Because when I'm nice about it, what motivates them to not do it again? That's just my 2 cents to that.
Alice just asked, don't we run the risk of being seen as a typical angry woman, especially that narrative of the mad Black woman?
Exactly, more especially.
You know what? I was listening to Dr. Shona this morning. I don't know if you know her. She's the one who called out, what's the British guy who walked out of his job because of the prince and the princess story? Have you guys seen this thing?
Yeah, the one from the TV station.
Yeah, but there's a lady who took on the guy on TV and shouted at him. And I'm there as well about saying, sometimes this thing of being nice doesn't work. Look at it now. It's changed that scenario where the guy had to walk out of the job because he thought he was a man who could say anything and do anything. And then a woman called him out, and she was actually very angry. and it was very clear that she was angry at him. But if she had come in a nice way to say, no, we don't do it like this, and he wouldn't have done what he would still be in the job and being nasty to women. So sometimes, and yes, it's also a context thing. We don't have to be seen as always angry, but there are times to be angry and show it and not be scared of showing our anger. And that is why women also get abused by men, even their own husbands, because they are too scared to tell your husband, I'm angry. You must tell him I'm angry, or your partner, I'm angry, I don't like what you do. And there are times when you need to do it.
Thank you, Elaine, for you.
Yeah, I think the critical thing that you've said, it's in how you do it. So if you feel that you're at a point where, one of my, this is an absolute principle of mine, is never to show and this is for me, it works for me, my vulnerability by crying in the workspace. Because I find that you cry, you simply get labeled. Typical women, very emotional, all of those kind of things come up. But the reality is at that point in time, and when I say not to cry in front of people, particularly the person that has aggrieved you, I think it's important to say to yourself, if I can't deal with the situation right now, let me just walk away for a bit. Let me think about it and call another meeting. I'd like to talk to you. And then in that meeting, to be able to express your dissatisfaction. As Ethel said, and I'm using her words, be angry, but be dignified. Don't do things that come back and bite you and don't actually impact the other person. So it's important to speak, to let your voice be heard. And I mean, if you just think about the whole movement around GBV, half the time it's because, as Elaine alluded to, we tend to be sweet. Oh, I'm just going to try and be nice about this. When you're nice, nobody hears you. So you need to be able to be firm, to be direct, but to constantly always think, if I behave in this fashion, what does that say about me? It's not just about today. You must always think about tomorrow.
Patience, I agree with you. However, can I just put a however there? Do you know that I cry when I'm angry? I don't cry generally when I'm upset. I cry when I'm angry, and that's when I'm showing extreme anger. And I, for myself, I'm speaking for myself now, I will cry when I want to cry in front of anybody because I want to express what I want to express. And if you think that by crying I'm being weak, you're wrong, because that's when I am at my most angry. So my point is, these things, I mean, we've been socialized as women not to show certain emotions. And this is what has gotten us into the problems that we have, because we just have been too nice, too sweet. I actually today don't mind being called whatever. I don't care, because I know who I am. If you label me, that's your problem. I know who I am. So really, I am at a point where I'm just saying, you know what? I will express myself. Yes, I've been brought up not to be rude, so I'm not going to be rude. But if I want to cry because I'm angry, I'm going to cry, and I will show you I'm crying because I'm angry, and you will know it.
I think you said an important thing is that let people know what is that emotion that you're experiencing. It's not an emotion of I'm surrendering now because I'm the weaker gender, but it's simply saying I am so annoyed, and this is the reason why I'm crying, as opposed to being labeled because, oh, there she goes again. Every time you say something she doesn't like, she cries. So there's a fine boundary there.
Yes, I agree, Patience, 100%. Awesome.
Thank you so much for the words of wisdom that you've imparted on us. We really, really appreciate it. And I don't know if you realize how big of an impact you've had on countless young women who've messaged me or Alice saying, I just watched the YouTube video, it was great. For everybody who asked to see the links to the videos, that the recordings of the previous two events, the CD Bootcamp as well as the interview preparation workshop, I attached them. I don't know which one's which. I can't tell you which one is which. We'd like to make our events better in the future if we can. So please, please, please complete the event review form that is also in the chat box. And a big thank you once again to Elaine, Karuma, patience, and to Ethel for coming in today to speak to us and to share so many great words of wisdom, from being angry to carrying yourself properly, to knowing your rights and your responsibilities that are attached to those rights. Thank you so much for everybody who took part in the series. I remember some of these faces from the very, very beginning, from I'm saying season 1, from session 1 of this series. We're so grateful that you came in, and we really hope that you got what you came for. If you have any further questions, please complete the event review form. Those questions will be compiled into a document for the panelists to answer, and then those answers will be released at a later stage. Thank you so much to Alice for going with me on this crazy journey to creating this event, and we hope that you'll attend many more events in the future. Don't worry, we have some great stuff lined up for you, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Please feel free to leave. Thank you.
Also, just to add to what Aka said, just to say really thank you to all the panelists and everyone who attended. I just wanted to just ask if you ladies have specific types of events that you think you would like to see that will cater to your needs. Also send them through to the group, communicate. Also, you can just also include that in the feedback form, the types of events that you would like to see, so we can be able to also cater to your needs as the alumni.